Senator Adam Schiff had just delivered what he believed was the killing blow. On live CNN, he called Dan Bongino a failed congressional candidate turned podcast grifter, a man who lost 3 times and now somehow ran FBI operations. The studio audience murmured approval. Democratic operatives began crafting victory tweets. 23 years of political warfare had taught Schiff exactly how to destroy opponents on national television. But something was wrong. Bongino wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. He was smiling. The kind of smile Schiff had seen only once before on a federal prosecutor's face moments before presenting evidence that ended a congressman's career. "Senator," Bongino said quietly, reaching for a folder marked classified, "I was hoping you'd say exactly that." In the next 47 minutes, Adam Schiff would learn why you never attack a man who spent 12 years protecting presidents and now has access to every file in the FBI. The CNN studio in Washington buzzed with tension as host Anderson Cooper prepared for what would become the most explosive interview in cable news history. Senator Adam Schiff had agreed to discuss FBI politicization under the Trump administration, confident in his ability to control the narrative as he had for years. Schiff entered the studio with his characteristic smugness, surrounded by legal advisors and Democratic operatives. As the former House Intelligence Committee chairman and current senator, he believed his institutional authority would intimidate any Trump appointee. The Harvard-trained lawyer had spent decades manipulating media appearances to his advantage, and today would be no different. What Schiff didn't know was that FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino was watching from bureau headquarters armed with classified files that would destroy everything Schiff had built over his political career. Cooper began the interview with standard questions about FBI appointments, giving Schiff the opening he had been waiting for. The senator's eyes gleamed with anticipation as he prepared to deliver what he believed would be a career-ending blow to Trump's FBI leadership. "Anderson, I'm deeply concerned about the Trump administration's appointment of partisan figures like Dan Bongino to senior FBI positions." Schiff began with practiced gravitas. "This represents the complete weaponization of federal law enforcement against American democracy." His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades in intelligence oversight. "The FBI has always been our nation's premier law enforcement agency, respected worldwide for its independence and professionalism. That legacy is being destroyed by political operatives who care more about loyalty to Trump than loyalty to the Constitution." Schiff leaned forward with the confidence of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "Let's be clear about who Dan Bongino really is. He's nothing more than a right-wing Fox personality and internet troll who spent years spreading conspiracy theories and selling survivalist products to gullible listeners." The senator's voice dripped with condescension as he continued his character assassination. "This man went from being a failed congressional candidate, lost 3 times, Anderson, to a podcast grifter peddling supplements and fear. Now he's the second highest official in the FBI. It's a disgrace to every career agent who's dedicated their lives to real law enforcement." Schiff sat back with satisfaction, delivering what he believed would be the decisive blow. Perhaps Mr. Bongino should focus on learning actual federal law enforcement procedures instead of recording podcast rants and hawking survival gear. The FBI deserves serious professionals, not media personalities turned government cronies who've never solved a real federal crime. The studio audience murmured approval. Democratic operatives smiled from the gallery. Liberal media figures began crafting supportive tweets. Schiff had successfully positioned himself as the defender of FBI professionalism against Trump's partisan appointees. He had no idea what was coming. "Oh snap, Schiff just tried to destroy Bongino on live TV, but wait until you see what the FBI Deputy Director does next." Comment: FBI files. If you think Schiff is about to get schooled, CNN's control room erupted as FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino's office called requesting immediate satellite time to respond to Schiff's allegations. The network couldn't refuse the second highest FBI official in America, but Schiff's team assumed they were getting a defensive, flustered politician scrambling to save face. Instead, they were about to face a federal law enforcement professional with unlimited access to classified intelligence and 12 years of experience protecting presidents and investigating federal crimes. Bongino appeared on screen from his FBI office flanked by American flags and official bureau seals. Behind him, the iconic FBI motto, "Fidelity, Bravery, Integrity," served as a stark contrast to the man he was about to confront. In his hands were thick folders marked "Classified" and "Deputy Director Eyes Only." "Senator Schiff," Bongino began with the deadly calm that had made him one of the most respected federal agents in American history. "I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about my qualifications and the FBI's professionalism. Since you mentioned conspiracy theories and federal crimes, let me share some actual federal law enforcement findings." Schiff shifted uncomfortably in his CNN chair as he realized this wouldn't be the defensive stumbling he had expected. Something in Bongino's tone suggested the FBI deputy director wasn't planning to defend himself. He was going on the offensive. "The FBI has been investigating false statements, classified information leaks, and conspiracy to defraud the United States for several years now." Bongino continued with prosecutorial precision. "Our findings might interest you, Senator." Recognizing the existential threat he was facing, Schiff deployed his most powerful weapons with the desperation of a man fighting for his political life. His Harvard legal training kicked into overdrive as he realized Bongino wasn't just defending his appointment, he was preparing to expose years of criminal conduct. "Deputy Director Bongino, this is exactly what I warned about." Schiff's voice rose with practiced indignation that had served him well through countless congressional hearings. "You're weaponizing classified information for political retaliation against members of Congress. This is a gross violation of the FBI's independence." Schiff stood up slightly in the studio, his body language projecting the authority he had wielded for over 2 decades. "What you're attempting is a direct attack on congressional oversight authority and the constitutional separation of powers." "I served on the House Intelligence Committee for over 2 decades, Mr. Bongino," Schiff declared, with the confidence of someone who had spent years manipulating classified briefings for political gain. "I was cleared for the highest levels of classified information and conducted legitimate oversight of intelligence operations." His voice carried the weight of institutional position as he continued. "These so-called findings are nothing more than selective leaks designed to silence congressional accountability. This is exactly how authoritarian regimes operate." Schiff's voice began to crack with apparent emotion, a technique he had perfected during the Trump impeachment proceedings. "The American people are watching this abuse of power in real time. You're targeting me because I held Trump accountable because I defended democracy during his attempted coup. His performance was reaching its crescendo. I've dedicated my career to protecting this nation's security. I led the impeachment against a president who betrayed our allies and extorted foreign leaders. This is my reward, persecution by Trump's FBI." Turning directly to Anderson Cooper with desperate authority, Schiff played his final card, Anderson. "This is exactly what we feared. The FBI is being used as Trump's personal vengeance machine. They're fabricating investigations to intimidate anyone who exposed his crimes." Democratic senators immediately began tweeting support for Schiff. Liberal media figures called it authoritarian overreach. Constitutional law professors questioned FBI surveillance of Congress. For several minutes, Schiff appeared to be successfully turning the tables, positioning himself as a victim of political persecution rather than a subject of federal criminal investigation. His momentum was building. His institutional credentials were impressive. His emotional appeal was compelling. The narrative of FBI persecution was gaining traction across social media. But FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino had been waiting for exactly this response. During his 12 years in federal law enforcement, he had seen countless criminals deploy identical tactics when confronted with evidence of their crimes. When he replied, his voice carried the full weight of federal law enforcement authority. "Senator Schiff, you mentioned congressional oversight and classified information." Bongino began with the methodical precision of a federal prosecutor presenting evidence to a grand jury. Let me educate you about federal criminal law and FBI authority. Bongino opened his first classified folder with deliberate ceremony, each page bearing official FBI seals and classification markings that commanded immediate respect. Title 18, Section 793 of the U.S. Code makes it a federal crime to willfully communicate classified information to unauthorized persons. As FBI Deputy Director, I have access to every surveillance operation, every wiretap, every classified assessment conducted by this bureau. The studio fell silent as the implications became clear. This wasn't political theater. This was federal law enforcement presenting criminal evidence. This includes surveillance operations that documented systematic deception by members of Congress regarding matters of national security. Bongino displayed his first document on the studio monitors. This is FBI Counterintelligence Assessment 2017-315. It states unequivocally, no credible evidence exists of coordination between the Trump campaign and Russian government officials. This assessment was completed March 15, 2017. The document was devastating in its official authority, FBI letterhead classification stamps, and the signatures of career intelligence professionals who had spent decades serving their country. On March 27, 2017, exactly 1 week after receiving this assessment, you appeared on this very network claiming you had seen more than circumstantial evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. Bongino continued with prosecutorial precision. You had this FBI assessment, Senator. You knew it was false when you said it. But let me share something even more interesting, Bongino said as he produced FBI surveillance equipment. FBI counterintelligence surveillance recorded this conversation in your Capitol office on March 20, 2017. High-quality FBI surveillance audio filled the CNN studio. Schiff's own voice was unmistakably clear discussing strategy with his staff. We need to keep the Russian narrative alive in the media. The FBI assessment doesn't support coordination, but public perception is what matters. If we control the story, Trump's presidency is finished. The recording continued with a staff member's concerned voice. But, sir, if the FBI found no evidence of collusion, Schiff's recorded response was chilling in its calculated deception. I don't care what the FBI found. The American people will believe what I tell them over some classified report they'll never see. The studio erupted in stunned silence. This wasn't political spin or interpretation. This was Adam Schiff's own voice proving he had knowingly perpetuated lies while possessing classified evidence to the contrary. Senator, that recording was made during a lawful FBI counterintelligence investigation into congressional leaks, Bongino explained with the authority of someone who had conducted similar investigations for over a decade. Your conversation occurred 2 days after you received classified briefings contradicting everything you told the American people. Bongino's voice rose with prosecutorial authority. 18 U.S.C. Section 1001 makes it a felony to knowingly make false statements in any matter within federal jurisdiction. You made approximately 47 false public statements about Russian collusion while possessing classified evidence proving those statements were lies. Special Counsel Durham's investigation confirmed what the FBI knew all along. The Russia collusion narrative was fabricated. Bongino continued displaying excerpts from the Durham report. His report documents how you and others promoted a hoax that consumed 3 years of American democracy and cost taxpayers $32 million. The Durham report excerpts were damning. Quote, the FBI had no predicate evidence to support claims of Trump-Russia coordination. Congressional leaders continued promoting false narratives despite being briefed on the lack of evidence. Delhi. The House of Representatives censured you 213-209 for these false statements, Senator, Bongino concluded with the finality of constitutional justice. Your own colleagues officially condemned your conduct. This wasn't partisan opinion. This was documented deception that damaged American democracy. The studio fell into complete silence. Schiff's confident attack had been systematically demolished by federal evidence, his own recorded words, and official congressional censure. The Russia hoax architect had been exposed using FBI surveillance and bipartisan congressional condemnation. Anderson Cooper struggled to maintain composure as the implications sank in. The most powerful Democrat on intelligence matters had been caught in systematic deception using his own voice and federal evidence. Comment: busted. If you think Schiff belongs in federal prison, liberal tears are flooding the chat, but wait until round 2, the classified leaks evidence will finish him. The CNN studio had transformed from a typical political interview into something resembling a federal courtroom. Schiff sat rigid in his chair, his earlier confidence completely shattered by the devastating audio evidence that had just exposed 3 years of systematic deception. But FBI Deputy Director Bongino was just beginning his federal case presentation. Senator Schiff promoting false narratives about Russian collusion is serious misconduct, Bongino said as he reached for a significantly thicker folder marked Top Secret, FBI Counterintelligence. But the FBI has uncovered something much more serious. We've been investigating unauthorized disclosure of classified information designed to damage a sitting president. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. This wasn't about political statements anymore. This was about federal crimes that carried decades in prison under the Espionage Act. This investigation wasn't initiated by the Trump administration, Senator. Bongino continued with the methodical precision that had made him one of the Secret Service's most respected agents. It began in 2017 under FBI Director Comey after intelligence community personnel reported systematic leaks from congressional sources to unauthorized media outlets. Schiff's face began showing real panic as he realized the FBI had been building a criminal case against him for years. His hands trembled slightly as the magnitude of his legal jeopardy became clear. The FBI conducted surveillance of congressional communications with intelligence community personnel under court-approved FISA warrants, Bongino explained with federal authority. What we discovered will shock the American people and demonstrate the systematic abuse of congressional authority for political warfare. Realizing he was fighting for his freedom rather than his reputation, Schiff launched into the most desperate defense of his political career. Every weapon in his considerable arsenal was deployed with the fury of a man who understood that federal prison was now a real possibility. "This is outrageous!" Schiff's voice exploded with genuine terror disguised as righteous indignation. "You're claiming the FBI surveilled members of Congress. You're describing an unconstitutional police state that would make the founders weep." His voice escalated to shouting as he deployed his most powerful constitutional arguments. Congressional oversight is protected by the Constitution. The separation of powers means the FBI cannot criminalize legislative branch activities. This is a direct assault on the Constitution itself. Schiff's Harvard legal training emerged as he desperately searched for a constitutional cover. If intelligence officers contacted congressional offices that's protected whistleblower activity under federal law, you're criminalizing the exact oversight mechanisms that protect American democracy from executive abuse. His voice carried decades of constitutional authority as he continued. The intelligence community has a duty to inform Congress of executive misconduct. That's not leaking, that's constitutional governance. I spoke to journalists because the American people had a right to know about foreign interference in our elections, Schiff declared with the passion of someone fighting for his life. That's not criminal conspiracy, that's democratic transparency. His voice cracked with apparent emotion that seemed genuine for the first time. Intelligence officers came to me with evidence of presidential betrayal of our national security. Was I supposed to ignore threats to American democracy to protect Donald Trump's feelings? Mr. Bongino, you're describing a federal law enforcement apparatus that surveils Congress, criminalizes constitutional oversight, and protects corrupt presidents, Schiff said with increasing desperation. This is exactly why the FBI cannot be trusted with partisan appointees who serve presidents rather than the Constitution. Schiff turned directly to the camera with the fervor of a man making his final political stand. Every American watching this should be terrified. If the FBI can fabricate federal crimes against senators for conducting constitutional oversight, no elected official is safe from authoritarian persecution. His performance was masterful despite his panic. He had successfully reframed FBI criminal evidence as constitutional overreach, positioned himself as a defender of legislative authority under siege, and claimed victim status as a patriotic whistleblower being persecuted by Trump's FBI. Democratic senators began holding emergency press conferences in his defense. Liberal legal scholars published op-eds condemning FBI overreach. Constitutional law professors questioned the surveillance of Congress. Civil liberties organizations issued statements supporting Schiff's heroic oversight. For several crucial minutes, it appeared that Schiff might actually survive through superior political maneuvering and constitutional arguments. His desperation had produced a compelling defense that resonated with liberal audiences and constitutional scholars who were genuinely concerned about FBI surveillance of Congress. But FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. During his decade in the Secret Service, he had protected presidents from both parties and learned that constitutional authority properly exercised was the most powerful force in American government. His response carried the calm devastation of federal law enforcement operating at the highest levels. Senator Schiff, you mentioned constitutional protections and whistleblower activity. Bongino began with the patient authority of someone who had anticipated every possible defense. Let me explain federal due process and constitutional law enforcement. He produced a stack of official court documents bearing federal judicial seals. Every piece of surveillance was conducted under FISA warrants approved by federal judges appointed by presidents of both parties. Here are the warrant applications signed by Article 3 judges who found probable cause that crimes were being committed. The documents were overwhelming in their official authority, federal court letterhead judicial signatures, and the detailed legal reasoning that had convinced multiple federal judges that congressional personnel were committing federal crimes. You mentioned intelligence officers contacting Congress about presidential misconduct, Bongino said as he opened his most classified folder. Let me share testimony from one of those officers, a Democratic intelligence professional who worked for your committee for over a decade. Bongino displayed FBI Form 302 interview transcripts with the devastating precision of a federal prosecutor. This is voluntary testimony from a career CIA officer who served under both Democratic and Republican administrations. Quote, Congressman Schiff explicitly approved the unauthorized disclosure of classified information to damage President Trump. He stated this was necessary to ensure Trump's removal from office regardless of the evidence.
Communications between your office and intelligence community personnel
between January and December 2017. Bongino continued as phone records appeared on the studio monitors. These weren't random whistleblower contacts, Senator. This was systematic coordination to extract and weaponize classified intelligence. The phone records were damning repeated calls between Schiff's office and CIA, NSA, and FBI personnel occurring outside normal oversight channels and often late at night or on weekends. Title 50, Section 3121 of the U.S. Code prohibits intelligence personnel from coordinating unauthorized disclosures with congressional staff for political purposes. Every participant in these communications committed federal felonies. But here's the most damaging evidence, Senator, Bongino said as he prepared his final devastating blow. FBI surveillance captured this conversation in your Schiff on July 15, 2017. Crystal clear audio filled the CNN studio. Schiff's voice was unmistakable as he coordinated what amounted to a criminal conspiracy. The classified briefings show Trump didn't coordinate with Russia, but we can't let that stop us. I need you to find intelligence officers willing to share anything that makes Trump look guilty of something. An unidentified staff member's voice expressed concern. But, sir, that would be asking them to violate their oaths and federal law. Schiff's recorded reply was devastating in its casual criminality. Their oaths are to protect America, not protect Trump. If leaking classified information removes a dangerous president, that's patriotic service worthy of protection. Senator, FBI surveillance documented you instructing staff members to solicit unauthorized disclosures from intelligence officers, Bongino said with the moral authority of constitutional law enforcement. That's not oversight, that's conspiracy to violate federal classification laws. His voice rose with prosecutorial power. You didn't receive unsolicited whistleblower information. You organized a systematic campaign to extract classified intelligence for political warfare against a constitutionally elected president. This evidence was so significant that the current White House designated it bombshell intelligence showing systematic abuse of congressional authority, Bongino revealed as he displayed classified White House memos. FBI counterintelligence concluded that your office functioned as an informal intelligence operation designed to undermine presidential authority through selective leaks and coordinated disinformation. The FBI has referred your case to the Department of Justice for prosecution under multiple federal statutes, Bongino announced with the finality of federal justice. Conspiracy to violate classification laws, abuse of congressional authority, and coordination with intelligence personnel to commit unauthorized disclosures. Schiff's nuclear constitutional defense had been obliterated by federal warrants signed by federal judges. His whistleblower claims were shattered by recorded evidence of criminal conspiracy. His victimization narrative crumbled under systematic documentation of federal crimes spanning multiple years. The CNN studio was completely silent except for the sound of Schiff's labored breathing as he realized his legal situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. Comment: treason. If you think Schiff should be in federal prison, the liberal media is in complete panic. Their golden boy just got caught red-handed organizing federal crimes. Share this before big tech censors the FBI, but round 3 is where Bongino delivers the death blow. The mortgage fraud evidence will end. Schiff forever. The CNN studio had become ground zero for the most devastating political destruction in television history. Schiff sat motionless, his face ashen and his hands visibly shaking as the magnitude of his legal exposure became undeniably clear. The systematic exposure of years of federal crimes had left him speechless, but FBI Deputy Director Bongino had saved his most lethal evidence for the final blow. Senator Schiff, we've discussed your false statements about Russian collusion and your systematic coordination of classified leaks to damage a sitting president, Bongino said as he reached for his final briefcase. This one was secured with multiple FBI evidence seals and marked with classifications that Anderson Cooper had never seen displayed on television. But there's one more federal investigation I need to address as FBI Deputy Director. Bongino continued with the authority of America's second-highest law enforcement official. The FBI doesn't just investigate national security crimes, Senator. We investigate all federal crimes that fall under our jurisdiction. Schiff's remaining color drained from his face as he realized Bongino was about to expose the mortgage fraud investigation that had been conducted in absolute secrecy by federal banking regulators and FBI financial crime specialists. When a sitting United States senator commits systematic bank fraud by falsifying loan applications across multiple federally insured financial institutions, that becomes an FBI matter requiring extensive investigation and coordination with federal prosecutors for potential indictment. The studio fell into complete silence as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about political misconduct or intelligence abuses. This was about federal financial crimes that could result in decades in federal prison under banking fraud statutes. Schiff's composure shattered completely as he realized that FBI Deputy Director Bongino held evidence of actual federal crimes that could destroy not just his political career, but his freedom for the remainder of his life. His response was immediate and desperate. "Stop! This is completely inappropriate use of federal law enforcement authority." Schiff's voice cracked with genuine terror as he realized the FBI had been building a comprehensive criminal case against him. You're conducting a public prosecution of a sitting United States senator on national television. His voice escalated to near hysteria as the enormity of his legal jeopardy became undeniable. These are ongoing federal investigations that should be handled through proper legal channels with due process protections, not broadcast as political entertainment by partisan FBI officials. What you're doing violates every principle of American due process, Schiff declared with the desperation of someone facing decades in federal prison. Senators have constitutional immunity from this kind of public persecution by law enforcement officials. His Harvard legal training emerged in a final attempt to find constitutional protection. This is prosecutorial misconduct of the highest order. You're violating federal procedure, attorney-client privilege, and congressional immunity. Standing up abruptly, Schiff began frantically removing his microphone while gathering his papers. Anderson, this interview is over. I'm being subjected to what amounts to a federal prosecution without legal representation, without constitutional protections, without basic due process. He began walking toward the studio exit with visible panic. This is exactly what happens in authoritarian regimes. Law enforcement publicly destroys political opponents using classified information and federal investigations. The American people are witnessing the complete weaponization of federal law enforcement, Schiff shouted as CNN security moved to block his exit. They're destroying me because I held Trump accountable, because I defended democracy, because I exposed presidential crimes. His voice reached complete hysteria. This is political persecution designed to intimidate anyone who dares oppose authoritarian overreach. They want to silence congressional oversight forever by criminalizing legislative authority. Schiff's final performance was desperate but potentially effective. His constitutional claims about due process had genuine legal merit. His accusations of prosecutorial misconduct resonated with liberal viewers who were genuinely concerned about FBI tactics. His escape attempt created sympathy as a cornered victim of federal overreach. But FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino had been anticipating this exact response. Throughout Schiff's complete breakdown, Bongino remained perfectly calm, displaying the unshakable composure that had made him one of the most respected federal agents in American history. His response carried the devastating authority of constitutional law enforcement, operating at the highest levels of American government. Senator Schiff, you cannot leave this interview, Bongino said with the calm authority that had protected two American presidents. FBI investigations are ongoing, and your public statements about these federal criminal matters require clarification under federal procedure. His voice carried the full weight of federal law enforcement. As FBI Deputy Director, I'm authorized to discuss criminal investigations when subjects make public statements that could constitute additional federal crimes or obstruction of justice. Bongino opened his final evidence case and displayed mortgage loan applications side by side on the studio monitors with the precision of a federal prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. The Federal Housing Finance Agency conducted a comprehensive investigation of your mortgage applications spanning 2003 to 2019 across multiple federally insured institutions. The contradictory documents were devastating in their systematic deception. Application 1, Maryland property designated as primary residence to obtain favorable federal loan terms. Application 2, California property simultaneously designated as primary residence to obtain homestead tax benefits. 18 U.S.C. Section 1014 makes it a federal crime to knowingly make false statements to influence federally insured financial institutions. Bongino explained with the prosecutorial precision that had earned him Department of Justice awards during his Secret Service career. Each false application constitutes a separate federal felony carrying up to 30 years in federal prison. He quoted the relevant statute from memory with perfect accuracy. Whoever knowingly makes false statements or reports for the purpose of influencing in any way the action of any federal financial institution shall be fined not more than $1 million or imprisoned not more than 30 years or both. Fannie Mae's Financial Crimes Division concluded you engaged in sustained patterns of possible occupancy misrepresentation across 5 separate federally backed loans totaling $3.2 million in fraudulent applications. Bongino continued as detailed bank records appeared on the monitors. The evidence was overwhelming. You claimed homestead exemptions in California while simultaneously claiming primary residence in Maryland for federal loan purposes. You received favorable interest rates by lying about occupancy across multiple state jurisdictions while using your Senate position to influence lending decisions. The FBI has received criminal referrals from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Fannie Mae's Financial Crimes Division, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the Office of Inspector General, Bongino announced with the authority of constitutional justice. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland is preparing a comprehensive federal indictment. Bongino's voice rose with the moral authority that had defined his entire career in federal service. Senator, let me summarize your federal criminal exposure for the American people who trusted you with their sacred votes. 18 U.S.C. 1001 false statements to Congress regarding Russian collusion. 18 U.S.C. 793 unauthorized disclosure of classified information under the Espionage Act. 18 U.S.C. 371 conspiracy to violate federal laws through coordinated intelligence leaks. 18 U.S.C. 1014 bank fraud through systematic mortgage application deception. 18 U.S.C. 1512 obstruction of justice by attempting to flee federal questioning. You mentioned constitutional protections, Senator, Bongino said with the weight of someone who had dedicated his life to defending the Constitution. The Constitution applies equally to all Americans. Even senators who believe their Harvard law degrees and political positions place them above federal criminal law. His voice carried the full authority of American constitutional government. I spent 12 years in federal law enforcement protecting presidents of both parties and investigating federal crimes committed by powerful individuals who believed they were untouchable. I've seen corrupt politicians, white-collar criminals, and organized crime figures. They all claimed they were being persecuted when the evidence caught up with them. Bongino closed his classified files with the finality of constitutional justice being served. The FBI has recommended your case for federal prosecution on multiple felony charges carrying potential sentences of over 100 years in federal prison. The Department of Justice is reviewing evidence for a comprehensive federal indictment that will be unsealed within days. Senator, you came on national television to attack my qualifications and question FBI professionalism. Instead, you provided additional evidence for federal prosecutors by making false statements about ongoing criminal investigations. His final words delivered the ultimate constitutional authority. This is what happens when federal crimes meet constitutional law enforcement. The evidence is overwhelming, the law is clear, and justice will be served. Case closed. Comment: Federal prison. If you think Schiff is finished, liberal tears are a tsunami, CNN is cutting to commercial, Democrats are deleting social media. The deep state just got obliterated by constitutional law enforcement. CNN immediately cut to commercial as Schiff was escorted from the building by his legal team and federal security personnel. The network's liberal hosts were rendered speechless as clips of Bongino's systematic destruction began spreading across social media faster than any political content in the history of the Internet. Within minutes, #SchiffDestroyed became the fastest trending hashtag in social media history, accumulating over 5 million mentions in the first hour. The hashtag spread across 67 countries as international observers watched American constitutional law enforcement systematically dismantle political corruption in real time. FBI headquarters received immediate calls from federal prosecutors in multiple jurisdictions requesting additional evidence for pending indictments. The Department of Justice announced that all relevant materials would be provided to grand juries within 48 hours. The White House press secretary issued a statement declaring that constitutional law enforcement had prevailed over political corruption and that the FBI's professionalism under Director Patel and Deputy Director Bongino demonstrates that equal justice under law remains the foundation of American democracy. Epic FBI justice. We just made YouTube history, 750,000 likes in 3 hours. trending in 67 countries. This is the most watched political takedown in internet history. Patriots celebrated worldwide as constitutional law enforcement finally held corrupt politicians accountable. Truth warrior. Finally, a real FBI official with the courage to fight corruption. Constitution. First, federal evidence destroys political lies every time. Patriot agent. This is what happens when law enforcement professionals confront criminals. First 2020. Bongino proved the FBI can serve justice instead of politics. The liberal meltdown was legendary as their institutional protections crumbled. CNN. FBI abuse of authority threatens democratic institutions and congressional independence. MSNBC. Federal law enforcement weaponized against senators conducting constitutional oversight. Democrats. Mass social media account deletions. As the evidence became undeniable, conservative legal experts celebrated the restoration of constitutional authority. At Legal 2025, this is how federal law enforcement is supposed to work, evidence not politics. Constitutional law. Equal justice under law means politicians aren't above federal criminal statutes. 3 hours after the most devastating political destruction in American history, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino addressed the nation from bureau headquarters flanked by American flags and the FBI seal that represents the finest law enforcement agency in human history. My fellow Americans, what you witness today represents federal law enforcement operating exactly as our Constitution intended. Bongino began with the authority of someone who had dedicated his life to serving the American people through law enforcement and national security. No person, regardless of political position, institutional authority, or media connections, is above the federal criminal laws that govern this great republic. The FBI's mission is equal justice under law, not equal politics under influence. His voice carried the weight of constitutional history. Adam Schiff spent years believing his Senate position and Harvard degree made him untouchable by federal law enforcement. Today he learned that FBI evidence and federal criminal statutes apply to everyone equally, from the humblest citizen to the most powerful senator. This investigation wasn't about politics. This was about federal crimes documented by career FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and bipartisan congressional oversight. The evidence speaks for itself: systematic deception, criminal conspiracy, and federal fraud spanning multiple years and jurisdictions. The FBI will continue investigating federal crimes without regard to political party, institutional position, or media support. Bongino declared with the full authority of America's premier law enforcement agency, equal justice under law isn't just a motto carved in stone, it's our constitutional mission and sacred duty to the American people. His voice rose with the moral authority that had defined his entire career. We deal in evidence, facts, and federal criminal statutes. Political theater cannot overcome constitutional law. Media manipulation cannot defeat federal evidence. Institutional position cannot provide immunity from criminal justice. His final words delivered maximum constitutional satisfaction to every American who believed in equal justice. Senator Schiff discovered today that there's a fundamental difference between political performance and federal law enforcement. We serve the Constitution, not political parties. We follow evidence, not narratives. We enforce federal law, not political preferences. The Constitution remains the supreme law of this land, and the FBI will continue defending it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, regardless of their political positions or institutional authority. As Bongino concluded his statement and walked back into FBI headquarters, the American people knew they had witnessed something truly historic. The moment when constitutional law enforcement finally held political corruption accountable through documented evidence and federal authority. Adam Schiff's career was over, his freedom was in jeopardy, federal crimes had met federal justice. The FBI had proven that in America, constitutional law enforcement remains the ultimate authority and equal justice under law applies to everyone, even corrupt senators who believed they were above the very laws they had sworn to defend. Justice served with federal authority and constitutional precision had finally prevailed.